On 7:15, and thank you very much for coming to the first meeting of the Borough Plan Advisory Committee in the term of the Council. And just want to welcome members of the public as well for their interest in the committee's work, and those watching this committee online. Just to flag that we'll be taking some public contributions at the end of the meeting, but not during the meeting. And so once the formal meeting has ended and that's been closed down, there will be some time if there's any questions or comments or anything that the public would like to ask and reflect on for the members of the committee. So this evening we'll hear an update on the consultation for the Wimbledon Masterplan, an update on the housing occupation, and Article 4, the local development scheme, which effectively is the timetable for the Borough Plan. And I've asked that the risk register be made available to colleagues and will be a recurring item on the agenda. So that's the item that has been handed to you by Tara. And finally, in terms of the future work programme, I've had one suggestion from Councillor G about the related to the campaign Green Rails pledge to protect pubs, and I'll be asking if there's any other further contributions to the work programme from members in any other business as well. Brilliant. So, apologies for absence. I think we're full house, which is fantastic. And just to note that there's a change in the substitute for this committee is Nick Draper now, rather than David Wood. And move on to item 3, so any declarations of interest?
I will make the same declaration as last time. I worked for a large housing association, Metropolitan, but I'm not aware that it necessarily hits any of these, but just in case.
No, at all. Thank you very much. Any further declarations of interest? Excellent. Okay. So notes from previous meeting, just page 1 of the pack, agenda item 3. There weren't any direct actions from there. Can we agree that they're accurate representation of the meeting? Thank you very much. So, over to item 4. So, just for a bit of background. So, we know that since 2014, Wimbledon Masterplan has been under development with kicking off with an ideas competition, which in March this year concluded a co-design process of a new public space in Wimbledon, in St Mark's Place and Wimbledon Theatre. And some ideas that came from that public consultation were ideas for solar panel market stalls and greater green space. Looking forward to similar to public engagement exercise in Mitcham as well. But as part of that, we know as part of the whole process so far, over 10 priorities identified in the public: need for mixed retail, transport interchange, mid-rise growth, and we also know that the future Merton team will put considerable energies into researching the plan. So these are just collating the numbers which are scattered throughout the report you'll see today. 222 participants at 3 events, 760 responses, and over 82,000 people engaged via social media on Twitter, which is pretty good. And as a side point, hope you will see the new Rainbow pedestrian crossing built this week as a good cultural addition to the area. I just want to draw, before Tara introduces the paper, just want to draw your attention to 3 sections in the document. So that's section 6 about greening. So you know that the importance of having greening the environment and introducing and softening other measures of green walls. Section 16 talks about the overall development and crossrail. So it's just keeping in mind the risk in crossrail too. Does it happen? There's a secondary option, of course, pursuing the regeneration of the current rail infrastructure there. Just to keep that in mind, that's ongoing.
How long is it?
I think that's for government funding. And then also section 19 in terms of residential development. And we know that there is that contradiction in the sense that they need to increase the housing stock because of the need to build more houses, but also some of the area has an Article 4 direction on it, and also the need to grow development sensibly as well. So just flagging those three things there. Tara, do you want to present the paper?
Thank you, Chair. If it's all right with you, I'll actually introduce my colleagues out
Of course, please,
I'm Tara Butler, I'm the Deputy Manager of the FutureWimbledon team.
Valerie Moran, Spatial Planner working with FutureWimbledon.
Catherine Thomas, Placemaking and Generation Officer at FutureWimbledon.
Paul Gary, Head of FutureWimbledon.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Chair. First off, I would like to thank the Wimbledon community, residential and business community and landowners who all contributed and took time to get involved in this consultation. As the Chair said, there was a lot in terms of number of feedback, and in tonight's presentation I'm going to cover some of the stats and numbers around the consultation process itself, move on to some of the key findings of the plan, and really covering off how we consulted, who responded, clarify what the purpose of the plan was in relation to this as a Borough Plan panel, overview of some of the feedback on the key themes, and then the next steps for what we're going to do now that we have this wealth of information. So to kick off, really, the consultation was presented to BPAC last year, just before the panel changed members, and then that led into the actual consultation process itself. We launched it just the end of September at the Wimbledon Forum, actually officially the 1st of October, and we ran it to the 6th of January, so that was a period of 14 weeks. That is actually more than double the statutory minimum that we would normally do for a supplementary planning document. And that was in a reference to the feedback where it was a lot of information to take in. We fully appreciate our residents are not town planners. It's a lot of detail in here to fathom out. And there was also the Sutton Tram consultations and other consultations going on at the same time. So we extended this out to January to get people plenty of time to feedback. In terms of how we consulted, there was the usual hard copies in the library. We wrote out to people who were on the FutureWimbledon's database. So that's resident associations, landowners, key business groups, anywhere else who we knew were already interested in planning Wimbledon. We also wrote to the statutory providers, so Transport for London, Mayor of London, the Environment Agency, Historic England, to get their feedback on the plan as well. It was featured in my Merton, which went to 80,000 households across the borough. It was in Town and Leisure, Wimbledon Guardian, and probably for the first time with Council Twitter, it actually had quite a wide engagement. So we've done the stats very recently, thanks to Catherine for pulling that together for us. It has a reach of 82,000 people. So what that means is online, between Twitter and Facebook, over 82,000 people were aware of the Masterplan, saw our posts and engagement. They read it, sorry. Of that, 2,600 people engaged with it. So that meant people liked it, clicked it, shared it, or read the actual articles. So we know that this is actually quite a wide reach. I think Tara touched on this in the last presentation to this panel, where we gave the headline feedback. We found that the best way of engaging was plugging into existing groups in Wimbledon. Quite often people expect the council to have standalone public meetings around projects like this. But we find it much more valuable to go to existing resident association meetings, business groups, because those people are already there, and it's easy for us to plug into a smaller group and have a more sensible conversation, a more meaningful conversation at a local level. So we find that very valuable. In terms of the responses, how people heard about it, it mostly was through social media, email and letters. Now with that I would say not all of that would have been the council's letters. We know many community groups wrote leaflets to the neighbourhoods as well, so that really has got a lot out. The report lists all the various resident groups meetings we read, so I'm not going to go over that here. In terms of who responded, about 80% of the respondents lived in Wimbledon, so the residential community. There were others, there was people who visit Wimbledon, work in Wimbledon, and about 8% who didn't stay. So it's not a surprise really, there's a large residential population that abuts the town centre. There's a keen interest in how the town centre develops alongside the residential area. We've also mapped all the responses where people gave us the postcodes, so the map is on page 9 of the report. Really is centred around Wimbledon town centre wards, a couple of bits in Rains Park and Morden, but really centred in the west of the borough, very much around Trinity, Abingdon, Borough and Hillside. In terms of the age profile, this was actually slightly younger than what we'd normally see in planning consultations. So it was a fairly even spread between a third of respondents were 31 to 45, another third were 46 to 60, and about 26% were 60 plus. Kind of matches Wimbledon's demographic really, and something we always can always do better on is engaging younger people. So that's still something we want to work on in the next version. So the master plan, as the chair said, had a number of key themes, which I'll go through the feedback on that. There was greening Wimbledon, mid-rise architecture, high quality architecture, public space and cultural space, traffic, transport interchange / CR2, so I'll give you an update there. And looking at the retail, which I think since we put this out, the world of retail has changed even more dramatically in the last 6 months than what was anticipated here, so there's a lot more work. You'll also find through the document we put word clouds in each page, so the bigger the word, the more frequent it was in the responses, so that gives a very visual cue as to what the main issues were. But overall, if I summarise all the themes, not digging into all of them, the biggest issue or theme which people responded around was the building heights. Questions around how do we define mid-rise, what is a tall building now compared to the rest of London, how much is too much for Wimbledon, how much is appropriate for Wimbledon. So all of that was in the mix. We had economic development came up next, and what we found was behind that was the question around, is it a commercial town centre? The council's view in the local plan is yes it is. There's a lot of jobs, offices, shops, that is commerce. However, we recognise that the residential neighbourhood and businesses work together to make a good place, so we need to not forget that both interact with each other. The concert hall featured in about 30% of the responses, so not massive. What we did find, there was actually not a lot through the consultation, then a big spike at one point after a local meeting about the concert hall, so it's not unsurprising that that's how that flurry of activity came in. Again, in those responses, there was nothing else but the master plan, it was just people saying, I want a concert hall. So it highlights the level of ambition, if nothing else. Traffic and transport came up as well, and I think really I've got to move into the point of the master plan really. We were clear up front, but I think we have to make it clearer that the master plan is supplementary to our borough plan policies. Its purpose is to guide planning application decisions by officers and planning committee. We already have strategic policies around Wimbledon Town Centre, but this plan was intended to illustrate and give clearer guidance on the type and form and quality of development we want to see in Wimbledon, and to offer up a vision for how the public spaces and architecture can be improved upon what was built, say, 20 years ago. It never set out to be a transport plan. The council actually has the TfL local implementation plan that sets out how the council will deliver a mayor's transport strategy. Now that doesn't mean to say we're not going to think about transport and traffic in the next iteration of this, but this was never set out to be a transport plan. It's a planning document. Given the time, I'm not going through it bit by bit. It's probably better if you've got questions to answer on, but I will cover off what we're going to look at next, and actually, the engagement with landowners and residential, which came up. In terms of residential, we had a lot of feedback, again a very current issue about housing, why we're not promoting housing in Wimbledon. The master plan didn't set out to define land uses, that is done by the local plan. Of course, successful town centres and places have mixed uses. We do have residential in Wimbledon, we haven't stopped it completely. But the Article 4 direction, which is there, is intended to keep jobs and commerce in Wimbledon over and above housing. The master plan did show how there's potential new residential neighbourhoods could be created once Crossroads 2 is built. And I think one of the key things with the master plan and the images that were in it, it showed Wimbledon as a complete finished product at the end of it, which would be the 2040s picture. And rightly so, a lot of residents couldn't understand what's going to happen in the next 5 years, next 10 years, and then the big picture. So although there was residential in that mix, we need to do a lot more refinement to really show what we really meant in the next iteration. Through the master plan, we've engaged with a lot of the key landowners, if not all the major landowners in the town centre. from Centre Court Shopping Centre to the owners of Morrison's, to a lot of the office blocks, and the pension funds that own and manage them. And a lot of that engagement was kicked off between us and Wimbledon, followed up by the council having one-to-one meetings with landowners and investors. And principally what that was about is for the council to understand what investment decisions are the pension funds likely to make and by when in Wimbledon, because that's what will determine when development's likely to come forward. And that gives us an idea as to when to expect planning activity, to plan out how the town may develop. Everything doesn't happen at once, and you don't want investment to stop at all. So we had to understand what pension funds want. There's leases running out, so actually we need to plan for that and be in the front foot, to be proactive. We're not just sitting here waiting for planning applications. We want to actually guide and make sure these investment decisions are guided by this plan. So we have engaged with a lot of the retailers and office developers. Some of that is confidential at the moment, but it's given us a lot of rich data to help influence the next version of the plan. So in terms of next steps, the team we've collated every bit of information that we can out of the responses. We've put all the responses online, so everything we've received is already publicly available. This document will be perhaps edited following tonight's discussion, but we'll put that online. We are going to focus on a number of key changes. So in no particular order, what we will do is we will clarify the status and purpose of the plan and how that fits in with Merton's development plan. The master plan isn't in isolation. We've got the London plan, actually the new London plan, and its new policy for Wimbledon. The new local plan as well, and how this illustrates how we want better quality development at Wimbledon. We know Belton Heights was a big issue. We have begun to model the master plan in 3D on the computer. So we're actually able to zoom into streets, play around with Belton Heights and see really what it does. And that's going to help influence how we revise downwards the Belton Heights. We know some were too high, we're revising them down. I'm not going to say tonight to what, because actually we've got a design process to go through to determine what works where. And we still want to engage landowners to make sure they can deliver what we're showing in that as well. There's no point in putting Belton Heights down too much, because that would stop development. But equally, I think we maybe went too ambitious in some of the sites in the plan as well. The design chapter, that was quite well received in the consultation in terms of defining Wimbledon's heritage, the materials, and how there is a bit of a DNA to Wimbledon. The responses are that didn't go far enough. It didn't go as far as a design code. So we're going to try and flesh that out further. That really is what will guide applicants and planning committee and help making decisions. The public realm section, which does link to traffic, streets and spaces, rainbows aside, we will be looking to revise all that chapter to actually really look at how we design public space and treat the streets. We were clear in the consultation meetings, we can't build our way out of a traffic problem. Wimbledon's problem is there's only one bridge, so it's always a bottleneck at Wimbledon Bridge. You can't unravel, you can't pedestrianise or get rid of traffic with only one bridge there. That is Wimbledon's problem. We've always anticipated we would challenge Network Rail and Crossrail 2 to build that extra infrastructure in, but that is a long way off. However, with the Mayor's Transport Strategy, with developer contributions which we receive, we can and should creatively reimagine the road that is there. We've already tested that in the theatre by closing a bit of the road off. We've worked with the community to come up with concept designs for St Mark's Place and the theatre. So I think we've got a lot more meaningful work to do on actually creating better spaces out of what's there without a big grand traffic plan. However, the long-term vision really should still be looking at how we actually calm down traffic and promote other forms of transport. In terms of framing the master plan, I would say this in a chronological order. I mentioned earlier the master plan images and maps really showed Wimbledon way into the future. We now appreciate that's too much for people to take, to understand.
If there was a future.
So what we want to do, and again this is why the landowner engagement's been helpful since we published this. Once we understand when investment decisions have to be taken, we can get a fair indication of the phasing of when development might happen. So we're going to try and redraw this plan to show what might happen in the immediate future, what might happen 5 years down the line, what might happen 10 years down the line. And I think with Crossrail, it's not if, it's when. It's not dead, but it's in Treasury reviews, cost-saving reviews. The government really aren't making any decisions on much other than Brexit at the moment, so I don't anticipate any movement quickly. But that doesn't mean that as a local authority we should be planning for the future. So it's probably not right to say with or without Crossrail. I would say before and after Crossrail is what we have to show it as. And we've begun engagement with Network Rail and Crossrail too. We've done that throughout this. But really the question is actually, how do we get investment in Wimbledon Station now? Because it's needed in the mid-2020s regardless of Crossrail 2. So actually this plan needs to flex and adapt to show how do we actually future-proof the station with any development around it, not just sit and wait for Crossrail 2 to happen to us. So there's a lot of changes that have happened even since we closed this consultation, which have really helped us sharpen up on what the plan is. I think I'll shut up there and take questions if that's all right, Jim.
Yeah, thanks very much. That's a very, very good overview. Why don't we allow 15 minutes worth of questions? And who wants to? I'm taking in threes as well, so who wants to ask? Carl and Linda and Ellis, have you got a question?
Not yet.
Okay. Carl, do you want to go first?
Yeah, just because you sort of finished on it, I'll start on it. It's two bits that I suppose are linked together. Looking for investment in the sort of Wimbledon station area in the mid-2020s and the building heights bit. And my question really was, how much is the building heights kind of influenced by what developers tell you is necessary in terms of the financials? Because I know sort of from my day job that can sort of change sort of month to month, year by year, depending on the market. And is there a potential in the future for that to be also influenced by the need to get investment in that part of the world without Crossrail 2?
Yeah. So in terms of the build heights which were initially in this plan, it was never designed to hit any specific targets. Actually, I should have said as well, metropolitan centre status in this was highly controversial. And again, a lot of people felt as if we were pushing development up to a limit to achieve that status. That wasn't the case. It was actually, we looked at plot by plot how big Wimbledon could sensibly grow, and that was against the backdrop of what else is getting built in London. So I know the building heights in this seems through the feedback big for Merton. Absolutely not big at all for anywhere else in London, frankly. But we understand it was too big for the population here, so we're addressing that. So we were never trying to build up to any specific target or viability or anything. It was really design-led, urban design-led.
Okay.
However, the team here do see developments day in, day out. We know what developers bring to the table. We know what's viable and what's not within a ballpark. You just know without doing full viability assessments. For example, Wellington House in Wimbledon's been built now, but that's a reclad. Pinnacle House in Wimbledon went up 3 floors as a reclad and extension. So we found a pattern of around a third to a half uplifts seems to be what's viable in Wimbledon now, so we took that as a rule of thumb, but not much more science behind that. Similarly with the station blocks in this plan previously, that was based on other overstation development which we know was happening elsewhere in London. So we didn't go into a full viability assessment of Wimbledon Station. We don't have the funds and resources to do that, nor should we. But it was drawn with an idea as to what we know was happening elsewhere. So a bit of credibility in that. With and without Crossrail 2, Crossrail 2 is a national infrastructure project. £30 billion right across London from Hertfordshire to the Solent. Any infrastructure asked for Wimbledon, such as overstation decks, new bridges, you can absorb that viability within the wider projects. Whereas if you try to deal with Wimbledon as a singular box, the viability would be more challenging. And now that's not new. The Unitary Development Plan had plans to build over Wimbledon Station in the 90s. Wimbledon Bridge House actually did build over the tracks in the 90s. So dealing with Wimbledon Station in isolation may not be viable without a lot more development on that station box. Whereas if you spread it out a bit, as we propose here, with Crossrail leading it, we'd probably get a bit of time. So what we are doing is we've opened up engagement with Network Rail to say actually what can we do feasibly with Wimbledon Station. hopefully get a bit of funding from them to help with feasibility. I don't think it's right that council funds all of that. It's not our own planning authority, but we do need some intelligence around that, and that can only come from the rail operators.
Got a couple of comments as well as a question. The Frank Gehry thing, I mean, it would be amazing if it happened, and you can understand why people were only focused on that when they came in for the consultation. But it really would be a massive scene changer, wouldn't it, really? If it happened. I don't know whether anything's going to be, if you could comment on that in a minute. I just wanted to comment on Tooting. I don't know, Brixton and Tooting, they have transformed their markets there. We don't have a market, but what they have done there have transformed their two markets in Tooting, and they are absolutely magical. If you go in there at night, it's fairy lights all around, but wonderful, independent little operations there. And it would be lovely to think that we would have something going on that's a little bit progressive. It all feels a very, kind of formal. I don't know, I mean, not enough kind of, needs to be a bit more, bit freer, I think. But I'd love us to look at that operation. We'd obviously have to be looking at a structure for it to operate within. But it's such an attraction. And we've got so many young people living in the area. It's really a fantastic project. But I was going to ask you about the Wimbledon Society's Vision 2040, because they put a huge amount of work into that document, and it's very thoughtful. And I just wondered, when we were talking about the future movement now, what's going to be the relationship, perhaps, with us and Wimbledon Society over that document?
I'll do markets then, consult on them with Wimbledon Society. You're absolutely right. I mean, this plan, because it's a planning document, is about how we shape buildings and deal with planning applications. However, Wimbledon is a lifetime centre. It's a living thing, and like the markets in Tooting and Brixton, I would call that placemaking. It's how you take places, and actually in those places they were empty car parks or redundant markets, which actually completely changed their offer to be more about food and drink, more about the experience, more about the atmosphere and ambience, which you picked up on. All of that is really what successful town centres have to do. And of course, we believe there is a space for that in Wimbledon. We've touched on that in parts of the Masterplan. I suppose that where Wimbledon has a challenge is Wimbledon's not bad. We don't have derelict sites, we don't have abandoned buildings which can be converted. So it's challenging to find the spaces or the landowners who would want to actually work and create those little market spaces. I think that's where we can use public space better. So the beginnings of that were around St Mark's Place, where there are Wimbledon runs some pop-up events for markets. Through the redesign of St Mark's, we'd be looking at market stalls. And the reason why it's useful is high streets are expensive places to open a business on, whereas markets and the food stall environment is a way of people to start up and establish a business and a brand, and then franchise out and move on. That's what Brixton Market's been doing for ages. So I think there's definitely space in Merton's economy to promote that. But really it's about having the space or building to do it within, all the operators who can do it. But certainly I think absolutely a place for that. On the concert hall, the council and the administration did take quite a bold move in this plan by actually referencing the concert hall and actually referencing support for it basically. We've been working with the Concert Hall Trust for nearly a year now. So that's the council, regen team and the trust. And of course Frank Gehry's a massive draw for any town. I mean, we all know the impact Borough in downtown Los Angeles has had. And we know culture adds to a place, and I think again, as retail is struggling, successful places are where you've got culture, a bit of life about it, something different beyond just buying things in a shop. So Wimbledon has a lot of culture anyway, but we all know the concert hall would be a good addition to any town. We've been working with the trust to actually look at how would that work? How would it be funded? How would it run? What's the business plan? How do we know it wouldn't just fall apart after a year? What's the 10-year model for that to run? How many people would have to go there to make it money? So it's quite nuts and bolts. It's really easy to be beguiled by the architecture. I don't let anyone Merton, one of the Matties would have a comment and I'll tell Frank Gehry how to do a building. He's more than capable. But really it's about how it works. And we're getting there. There's an ongoing positive dialogue about how it works, and if it works, there's then conversation about the council's lands. But we're not at that stage yet. So the plan has certainly said, yes, we recognise it. I think there's been other public meetings about it without us. I think the message is the same. So it's really a bit of a wait and see and prove it works. And sorry, the Women's Society. They've put a tremendous amount of work into this. Not for the first time either. They've done a very good plan in 1984 called Our Town. I found it in the archives and I thoroughly wanted to read it. And some of it has come back in their 24 edition. I've read through it a number of times, and actually there's a lot in the Women's Society plan that is already in the Council's plan. A lot of overlap, probably 80% of it. But what we need to do is, I want to engage the Women's Society further, and we just haven't found the time to do that while we've been preparing this. But I want to draw the common strands together, because the only way the town's going to develop successfully is everyone tries to get behind and collaborate on the same thing. Having multiple plans everywhere probably isn't going to help. But I think there's enough commonality, certainly with the Women's Society and Merton's one, once we revise the house and calm it down a bit. So I think there's certainly a conversation to have there, because we want to get this right. We're not in a mad rush to adopt it, we've got time to do it. So really, we are currently through the revisions, picking out the bits of things. So that's the Women's Society plan. We're picking the bits out of that are common to ours and actually really amplifying that actually there is common ground there. And that's framing the next situation.
You've also got senior people there prepared to give free time and expertise, which be a waste, wouldn't it, really? Not to in terms of officer time, I'm just saying
And I think also,
isn't it?
And I think also because this is the first consultation we've had on the plan. I know it's been a long time to get here and a lot of engagement up front. It's the first consultation that's thrown up way more issues and comments and feedback. So it's good. I'd rather that than nothing at all. But yeah, certainly there's other conversations to have with the local groups.
So we've got time for one more question. Is any colleague want to ask a question? Brilliant. Okay. So let's move on to the next item on our agenda. So that is the briefing paper on houses in local occupation. So just a bit of background. Council policy is to implement a register of landlords for all landlords, and not just those which are mandatory licences. So just flag up mandatory licences, and colleagues in FutureWimbledon, please do correct me. It's for those properties 3 or more stories with 2 or more different families living in that property. So the general direction of travel, I believe, in the policy is to implement it for all landlords. So your single story dwelling to your 2-story house as well. So as part of this work, it's required to explore all options, including Article 4. And there's on the last page of this background document, story attention to it, references that there's an assessment going on, which will be published in autumn 2019, and this was following this week's cabinet signed off the paper. So what I previously circulated via email is, while what I would suggest is to support this work is that we would request cabinet to do a formal viability assessment. So taking this briefing paper here and turning it to look a bit more formal, just to support the case, for licensing or for Article 4 or for both. But it's really just to add a bit more ammo to our position to support a healthy HMO stock across the borough. So I think apologies, who from FutureWimbledon would want to comment on the paper? So Tara's going to speak to the paper, and then we'll take some questions from them.
Thanks, Chair. It's quite a lot of planning terminology in this paper and housing terminology, so please excuse me and please correct me or stop me if it gets to laborious. Private rental sector is really important in London, and it provides a lot of accommodation, about 25, or just below 25% in fact. And it's also typified generally by people at a certain stage of their, if you like, their housing life cycle. Will tend to be at the stage from between their sort of late teens, 20s, into their 30s, now into their 40s in London as housing is so expensive. This type of housing, house shares, are called HMOs, so houses of multiple occupation, and that essentially is a group of people living together. And that can be definitely a force for good, but there's also cases where groups of people living in houses have created more noise and disturbance maybe than other types of accommodation. But house shares or flat shares are an important part of the way we live in our housing life cycle here. There's two lots of legislation that governs house shares. There's housing legislation and there's planning legislation. So housing legislation will deal with things, as the chair said, if you're registered, at the moment, if you're a certain size of property, you have to be on the council's register and comply with certain things. And the Cabinet this week proposed to bring that across for all landlords over the course of the next while. But it deals with things like fire safety. It deals with things like the size of the bedroom and the number of people actually living in the property. It deals with things like bins and smoke alarms and stuff like that. And basically the landlord has to comply with that licence. And there are penalties now, there are legal penalties under housing law that allow the council to chase after people who don't comply with those things. So if you like, it deals with the internal safety of the occupants and the number of people living there. Planning legislation really deals with the impact on neighbours broadly. It doesn't deal with fire safety necessarily, but it does deal a little bit with bedroom size now, and it deals with the external appearance of the building largely. But it doesn't deal with many of the key issues that people complain about, like noise and mess in front of garden. At the moment, as the paper sets out, there are two types of house share. One which automatically requires planning permission. So houses with HMOs or houses in multiple occupation with 7 people or more living in them, you need planning permission for those. So if you have a normal big house, you can't just invite 7 people to live there, you have to get planning permission for those. Smaller ones, so 6 people. No, housing, confusingly enough, the Housing Act is 5, but in planning terms, it's 7 onwards. So it's another real example of where legislation doesn't quite go to dovetail together.
It makes sense.
Smaller ones, you can have a house share with, say 4 of us are living together, and you don't have to get planning permission. And it's no surprise to anybody that on page 4 of the paper, or page 44, it shows a map and it shows the areas which have a commonality for HMOs. And if we took a map of the terraces, the Lake Victorian, Edwardian terraces in London, the sort of 1920s buildings as well, early 1920s, we would find, again, lots of those are house shares now in London. That type of Edwardian terrace, as you find in Raveney, as you find in Collier's Wood, Dundonald, Benton Hillside, Benton Abbey, lots of people live in house shares in those. People at different stages of the housing life cycle, lots of young professionals, people in work, live in shared houses. And in most of London, actually, the further out you go, the more semi-detached the properties get. Generally speaking, the fewer big house shares you get. So, as there are concerns about some of the factors that are common to house shares, such as too many people living there, too much noise, too much rubbish, the council has taken several types of action. One is, as the chair described, looking at the licensing regime. The other proposal is to look at something known as an Article 4 direction. And what that would mean is, instead of just having big house shares having to have planning permission, you could extend that to smaller house shares. So that means pretty much every house of that share would have to have planning permission. There are other ways of doing it as well. It could be a geographic basis. So you might have a certain part of the borough where this applies and another part where it didn't apply. And some other councils have taken that kind of along with planning policies. So they've developed new planning policies that say if you have a street and 10% of the properties are already converted to house shares, you can't have the 11th one will refuse, things like that. So at this stage, we've collected quite a bit of evidence, but we need to do more, as the Cabinet in this paper sets out. At this stage, although there definitely are some cases where there are problem house shares, we don't have enough evidence to do an Article 4 direction. An Article 4 direction requires quite a lot of proof, and it's not coming through that there are so many HMOs that are causing so much problem, and there's no other way to deal with them apart from removing planning restrictions, that we can go forward with that at this stage. However, over the next sort of 3 months, what we're doing with our housing colleagues is looking at small areas. So dividing each ward into roughly about 6 portions, known as lower super output areas in sort of technical term, and looking at properties in there and seeing if we can, really establish a really firm base instead of looking more generally to see if there is evidence. And that evidence will help support the licensing regime, and it may help to support an Article 4. It may not, but it may do. And we will definitely also look at geographic differences in case it doesn't support everything about the lives. Chair, I'm happy to take questions at this stage.
Okay, so one question from G, and Carson. G,
thank you, Chair. One of the things with Article 4, as says on page 47, it takes 2.5 years to complete from starting to finish. Now, presuming those 2.5 years, landlords can think, well, actually, I've got 2 years, I might as well get my planning to do the conversion now. So do you think there'll be a surge of conversions before the Article 4 comes into force, which would be 2.5 years down the line?
It is possible. How you create an Article 4 is you gather the evidence, you do a consultation, you then make the Article 4, so you will go to full council and say, this is what we're doing. And after that, council has 2 choices. It can bring it in immediately, or it can wait for a year. And the reason the council might want to wait for a year is if council's bringing an immediate Article 4 and say, I own a property and my property rights are now restricted by this Article 4, I can claim financial compensation for the council between the difference in value of my property before and after the Article 4. So that's a pretty big, that could be a big financial hit for the council. And that's why almost all councils, I don't think I've come across one that's brought in an Article 4 the day after full council. They all wait for a year. And councillor, you're absolutely right. Because everyone's been notified through the consultation, it could be the case that people apply for more HMOs. They might not, but it's certainly a scenario. And the other thing to say is an established HMO wouldn't be affected by this. So if someone has a property and they can prove that for the last 10 years it's been happily a house of multiple occupation, licensed or otherwise, they won't be affected by the Article 4 and they won't have to seek planning permission. So potentially some of the worst offenders in terms of noise and everything might not actually be touched by an Article 4 direction.
I've had conversations with Tara, so I don't want to rehearse any of that. But I would say that I'd really like to get involved on developing the evidence, certainly for my area, because I think I was speaking to our enforcement officer who thinks she's identified over 100 HMOs. We've identified 84 and they're being checked through. But the big issue around it really is going to be around resources, because we don't have the staff currently, and even if we increase, I know Steve was talking about increasing the staffing, we don't have the staff really to be able to research every single HMO. And I'm looking at that map and seeing that it's not just Graveney, I know, but all I would say about the Graveney side of it is that I think in the Colliers Wood you've probably got properties there at quite high value and people are actually paying higher rents. I think what we're talking about in my area is people are actually on very low income, and it's a different, it's a completely different scenario really, and it is linked with antisocial behaviour. So I've got no illusion that it's all going to get sorted out. But for me, the key thing is that one, we identify where they are. 2, that we actually take enforcement action against them whilst whatever else is going on. And 3, that we pull together the evidence. So I'm happy to get, and I know the local police team will be happy to support that as well. But it's a major issue in my ward, and it's not just about HMOs, because we've got illegal conversions that are not HMOs. We've also now got semi-independent care homes popping up, which are presenting problems. So it's because the property is a lot cheaper in our area. There are a lot of issues for us there. So it's complicated, really. But yeah, it's a move in the right direction. So I've got to be positive.
Yes, actually, one of the positive things about the difference between planning and housing information is actually that properties are licensed under housing rules that aren't actually HMOs in planning terms, which is kind of handy, which means that the actual occupants of the property are being looked after rather than just in planning terms it can be a bit inflexible. Is the property like this? Yes or no, regardless of the quality of life or the quality of the situation of the people living in there. So actually the map that we've pointed out there, it includes things like the student accommodation on Burlington Road, it includes all sorts of other, it includes a couple of properties that are converted from warehouses under prior approval and are now flats. So actually it's much more comprehensive, which I think is really good, because these are things that the Article 4 wouldn't touch, but are now are legally required to have a licence and are required to deal with all the issues in there. And you're right about the evidence, and Councillor, I know you've been very helpful in supplying a big list, which is part of the evidence for both the licensing and the Article 4. But I think we must be careful to focus on the issue as well, because the issue is the antisocial behaviour. And one of the issues with Article 4 is it's such a blanket tool that it touches, 3 people happily living in a flat share who are perfectly law-abiding people, but then the landlord has an extra bill to pay now, and it passes them on those kind of things on the tenants. So it's really useful that you're willing to help with this, because I think you're right about your assessment of the market conditions.
We've got time for 3 more questions, so Colin.
I think some of what you said clarified part what I was going to ask, but just to be clear, so the research that you're doing is based around the heat map as is, so what you're going to be doing is looking at the super output areas, but they'll effectively, it's not for the whole borough, you're concentrating it in the areas where, am I right in thinking it's where the sort of you think the concentrations are, which in turn is based on census data at the moment from 2011 rather than the kind of more up-to-date stuff.
No, it's actually based on more up-to-date stuff.
Okay, sorry,
the super output area is defined by the census, but the information that we're seeking now, alongside our housing colleagues and licensing, is going to look across most of the borough. I mean, I have to say, areas where councillors or residents or people haven't brought up issues about antisocial behaviour or houses and multiple occupation, there are definitely parts of the borough where this isn't as much of an issue. And we won't be concentrating on those. So we will start with the res areas, if you like, and work outwards. But we will concentrate, within the resources on the areas where people are saying that this is an issue, this is a problem, this is what we're seeing. And there is, if you like, an arc through that res area and down the eastern side of the borough, more concentrated than some other areas.
And there's not you're not sort of predetermining it in terms of having you think there'll be a maximum number of areas that you can cover at the end of it. It's literally just about looking at the research and seeing.
I think if we're to bring in any kind of policy or charge or issue, we really need to know what it is where it's going to apply the most and where we're going to really, really make the difference. And especially if we're to have, in the Article 4 way, any kind of geographic focus, we need to be very sure which areas are in that. In fact, when we go for the Article 4, last time we did it for office to residential prior approvals, the Secretary of State made us go back and cut out every single existing office to residential conversion. So we really need to get our maps and our geographic areas correct.
Yes, when you were talking about it, the importance of focusing on the fact that this is an issue regarding antisocial behaviour primarily, that may be so, but and I've got it in fix, not quite as much as Gradney, but it's pretty bad in fix. And what I'm looking at it from the point of view of is that, quite frankly, we've got some landlords who are absolutely taking advantage of people who find it difficult to find any kind of accommodation, cheap accommodation, you know. So, I actually had a property in Mitcham where they were doing a shift. They had two bedrooms with about 6 mattresses in each bedroom. On a daytime shift, you used it to sleep in, and then went out to work for the night shift. The night shift work, people came out home in the morning and took over. You know, I mean, it's really, as I say, taking advantage of these people, as well as all the other problems it causes. And talking about resources, and I know housing has had very full resources to keep up to date with this, until now they're making some improvements there. But I know Linda goes out. I go out as well. I look through letterboxes to check what's happening behind closed doors, because a lot of things are going on. People don't apply for licences, planning permission, any sort of permission at all. They just do it behind closed doors, and it's only by sheer luck, if you hear from the neighbours that something's going on, that you can get it checked out. And I would hope that, I'd be certainly happy to help to find evidence, but I think most of the councils would be happy. They know, I would hope they know what's in their ward roughly, to help take part in evidence finding, about how many of these problems there actually are. So, yeah.
Dennis's question.
Right, thank you. Do we have a look at these HMOs and make judgments about how dangerous they are to the actual people who use them? I've spent several times in my working life, I've had to look after these places, and more often than not, the old ones are more of a danger to the actual users of the HMO rather than their neighbours. I mean, I'll give you one for instance. The most dangerous ones, in my opinion, are the ones that are above shops, because there's only one way out. There is no alternative exit if anything goes wrong. And this particular one had 7 rooms. I put all the locks, closers, fire and smoke alarms up. And then there's a problem with the bathroom window. I go back, they've moved people into the 2 sitting rooms that they're using. So instead of having 5, they've got 7. And they've also taken out one of the smoke alarms because it went off too often. Now, surely the idea of a smoke alarm is to warn you when something's going wrong. And what I did, I got a friend who actually got different smoke alarms, wired them into the electric circuit so they couldn't take the batteries out, they had to live with them. And I got complaints about that from the actual owner who was living off-site, because one or two of his sort of residents, for want of a better word, was complaining about the noise because they're going off too often. Now, to me, that's a danger to the people who are living there, not the neighbours. And do we do anything about, or do we look at that sort of problem?
Housing and licensing, we look at that sort of problem. But I will say, in Geraldine's comment on resources, and also Linda's comment as well, people who are going to do things illegally are going to do things illegally. And yes, it is up to the council to enforce, and yes, all of these regimes require robust enforcement. So that part of the housing licence deals with things like fire safety. But there will be a group of landlords in this borough whoever is living in that property, they are not going to comply with either housing or anything like that.
But I was going to say, wouldn't that anticipate, once you grant a licence, having a mandatory revisit at some point?
I think that's based on how other councils do licences.
Yeah, I mean, I've never done a HMO in this borough, I must admit. Most of mine are in Kingston, Richmond, Fulham, places like that. but I don't know how this borough operates. But there can't be that many differences, surely.
Yeah, I think that's the proposal that went to Cabinet on Monday night, is to boost the housing team to be able to do more of that, and to also, let's face it, target those luckily few, but incredibly dangerous landlords that are leaving there, but their tenants and their neighbours, really, in a huge amount of danger. But it does require enforcement, and it does, you're right, people are actively going to have to.
They're deliberately breaking the rules.
Okay, so I'm going to sort of wrap this bit of advertisement business up, and just to ask, so in terms of formalising a recommendation for officers, can we agree that we would like a more formalised paper continuing the work Tara and the team are doing for the next meeting of feedback?
Yes.
Yes.
Do we have ideas of how to restrict people's surge of trying to change their houses in that sort of market situation?
We'll try, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
I think maybe through your network, just ask the question, because someone else, you're right, someone has had this problem before, and if there's a creative solution we're not aware of, let's be aware of it. But I think it's a trying task, but it's good to ask the question as well. Excellent. So we've got agreement? Cool. Thank you, everyone. So the next item of business, the local plan, the local development scheme. So effectively, what this is a timetable change, and I'm sure Tara, you speak to this? Yeah. So this is all as a result of the London plan, and as we know, the London plan is delayed for various reasons, and I won't go into further detail because Tara, no doubt, has been to a lot of the sessions will speak on that.
Thank you, Chair. This report is the only item tonight that we'd like to take on to Cabinet in July with your support. This proposes to set a new project plan timetable, as it were. It's known catchily as the Local Development Scheme, and it's actually something we have to do legally. And our last scheme ran until this year, so it is time to update our project plan. The project plan is for the local plan, and there are two parts to our local plan in this document tonight. There is the work that you have been working on the sites and the policies and all the other borough-wide issues, and then there is also the refresh of the South London Waste Plan that we're conducting with Croydon, Kingston and Sutton. On the first plan, as the Chair rightly said, we've been through 2 rounds of consultation now, and we've discussed these at previous borough plan meetings, including the outcome of the consultation at the last meeting. And there's a couple of reasons why we want to make sure that this timetable is now a bit more robust than it was before. One, as the Chair said, is the London plan. Now, all boroughs in London need to be in general conformity, so basically broadly in line with the London plan. The London plan has just been through nearly 6 months of examination by the Secretary of State's inspectors. The examination hearings finished about 2 weeks ago, and they started in January. And they looked at everything, because the London plan is about an inch thick, 500 and something pages, and goodness knows how many policies and issues. One of the key issues for us, obviously, is the proposed housing targets, which is very, very high. Another key issue is that we wanted Morden and Collier's Wood to put the opportunities that are there to be recognised more in the London plan, and we attended some of these hearings. And the final plan won't be adopted until the early 2020 on the current on the new timetable that they're proposing. So if we were to stick to our current timetable, we will be basically trying to guess what the inspectors appointed by the Secretary of State were going to ask the Mayor to do, and then what the Mayor was going to do and what he was going to finally publish. And we'd end up with our plan being probably quite it wouldn't be robust. It would be we would base it on guesswork, which really wouldn't be a good idea. So that's one of the reasons. And another reason is as well, these are slightly uncertain times, I think we can agree. And lots of evidence and lots of consultation, lots of engagement with people needs to go into these plans to make them meaningful. And we've done 2 rounds of consultation, but I really feel we could do a bit more detail, especially on the sites, which was surprisingly quiet in the local planning consultation. You may recall, councillors, at the last meeting, we had a really broad range of issues in the 200 plus responses we got, but they were mainly around policy areas, very little on site. And so therefore I think we need to do a bit more just to make sure that people are comfortable with the site proposals in the plan. And we also need to gather the evidence behind that as well. So our proposal really is that we do a lot more evidence gathering, including consultation and engagement with groups over the next year, to come forward with final draft plan autumn 2020, looking to adopt in 2021. The other plan within this document is called the South London Waste Plan. South London Waste Plan was first adopted in 2012, and it deals with planning applications that come in for waste management facilities across 4 boroughs. So legally, every borough has to deal with waste it produces within the borough as much as possible. Decades ago, we all used to ship our waste out to landfill at Bedford and Surrey and all sorts of places, and that really is far from being sustainable. So for about 15 years now, it's been ruled that every borough has to deal with their waste as close to the borough as possible. So we work together, and not just black bags, I should say, but from construction waste and all sorts of other waste streams as well, industrial waste, business waste, etc. We worked successfully on the waste plan with the other 3 boroughs in 2012, and we're proposing to do that again. And actually that makes it much faster, much easier, and much cheaper to do by working together as 4 boroughs. So we're proposing a timetable for that, which will be in consultation later this year and adoption, I think, in 2021 as well. So I'm happy to take questions.
Brilliant. Okay. I've got one question, but I'll open the floor to other colleagues. Carl and Louise. Carl.
It was just a quick one. It says that delegation is sought to the director and cabinet members so that the development scheme can be amended. Does that mean that if, for example, there's a significant further change, that wouldn't necessarily be referenced and be sort of scrutinised here?
No, a significant change was always take back through the statutory democratic process.
Okay.
This is, in fact, the statutory that project plans are statutory documents, and one of the things we're measured on when we go to inspectors and to the Secretary of State is how we comply with this. So if there was to be a big change in the timetable or any kind of big significant thing, we would come back to the wall and go back to cabinet. It's definitely happened that there have been amendments from month A to month B or month B to month C, and that kind of small stuff really I hope we can make just with a delegated decision.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
And actually, you draw attention to a paragraph I should have flagged before to everyone. So it does reference that both the chair and vice chair will be consulted. As of yet, we don't formally have constituted vice chair. It was previously in the regime, but because of the change in configuration of the council, we're seeking clarity from democratic services. I don't know if they've come back.
I haven't yet, but I'm sure they will next week.
So when I do, I'll get back to colleagues just to confirm the arrangements. My question was sort of extending to Carl's, but relating to the South West London Waste Partnership consultation in terms of the process of that. If you could elaborate a bit more in terms of does it go to our same communities? Is there anyone that colleagues would be interested to see what this all come here? What's the best?
It comes here. It's a local plan. It doesn't. It's quite hard because waste is a big issue in boroughs. It's quite hard to separate it from things like bin collection, but this has absolutely nothing to do with bin collection. It simply is sites and policies. If on a very rare occasion we get a planning application for a waste facility in this borough, I mean, the existing plan was adopted 10 years ago, and I can't recall how many planning applications for waste have been to planning committee. 2 or 3 in that time, maybe. Certainly a couple of controversial ones that I can recall, but really we're counting probably on our hands to work out how often the waste plan is used.
So I think let's towards that item to a vote. So, question then was posed as, do we recommend to Cabinet that the timetable is delegated?
But can I just ask?
Sorry, Joe.
I don't disagree, obviously, but as you mentioned, the huge hike up in the housing target that we've been set. Is this and I understand you're already clearing that. I mean, is this setback of the dates going to have any effect on that, or I mean, are we still looking at them to bring it down a bit, basically? Yeah.
We and all the other outer London boroughs attended the hearings on the London Plan examination with our concerns about the targets. We want to set something forward. We want to work on something from Merton that's both ambitious and will meet residents' housing needs, but also remotely deliverable. And many other, all other outer London boroughs are in the same situation.
Yeah.
And I think probably that's why the London Plan team have, first of all, had 6 months of sitting in front of a pile of inspectors in the chamber and the GLA being interrogated, and second of all that the timetable has moved forward by 4 months or so for them. So actually this will help us a lot in establishing whatever comes out of the London Plan hearings. It will help. Having extra time to deal with it will really help us a lot.
Okay. So with 5 minutes left, we'll go into the last item of business, which is any other business. So in that, I just wanted to raise the future work plan. Regiva's suggested one item, which I'm happy to add on to the future work plan. Does colleagues have any other additions they would like to add? So any item of
no, I mean, what's Najib's item?
Sorry, so at the beginning I referenced, so do you want to introduce it?
Yes. I was going to say that I spoke to Tara a year ago, but looking through my emails, which the archive does work on the network, it was 2 years ago that we met. 2 years ago I was approached by Camera, the campaign for real their local manager in South West, and he said, Wandsworth just approved an Article 4 on pubs, protecting pubs in Wandsworth that were developers or landlords were converted to residential. And he said, is this something that we could do in Merton? I said, well, absolutely, but can you produce a list of pubs? He went off and very well produced a list of 55 pubs that have merit architecturally and position-wise in Merton that could be potential Article 4 applications. We had a chat, and obviously you were busy, I was busy elsewhere, and sort of fell to the side. And this seemed like a very good opportunity to try and resurrect that Article 4, and that's something that we would be interested in progressing within Merton on pubs in Merton, and following the model of Wandsworth.
So, and I think it would be worth just looking at that as an issue. I'm from previously living in Wandsworth many years ago. I know that sort of community asset schemes and those sort of local campaigns about that. And I think we have to be mindful of those landlords and the communities if they believe that pub should, or architecturally, I'm sure it merits the camera's attention, that it may not merit the community support or indeed the landlord to own them. But as a small side item, it may be worth looking into. Are there any other issues, items that colleagues would like to look into?
It strikes me that the Wimbledon plan process has been quite a healthy thing to go through and to go out there and to speak to so many people. I wondered if it would be possible if we could bring something to the committee that would look at the idea of promoting neighbourhood planning a bit more across the borough, to have in other areas potentially to have a sort of bottom-up approach.
Because there's government funds for that.
Periodically. So actually that's something we've done the community forums. We had a presentation we used to go to community forums about to promote neighbourhood planning. I'm still a bit amazed that we don't have one yet in this borough, although I know there's at least one group that's very interested. But yes, definitely we can run through sort of the idea of maybe we could bring the updated version of the presentation to the meeting, and see what we got from there.
Okay. If there are any other ideas, do email them to myself and Tara, and I can put something together and circulate via email. If everyone's happy with proceeding in that way. Cool. Excellent stuff. All right. Well, I call this meeting to a close. Thank you very much everyone for attending. So for the next 10 minutes, if there's any member of the public who has a question or want to raise anything at all, I'll take questions in 3. So 1 question here. Is there any other questions? 2, 3. Maybe. So go for it. Sorry, so could you introduce yourself and where you're from, if you're from an organisation?
Yeah, my name's Lynn Gould and I'm the new chair of WERA.
Okay.
And I wanted to say thank you for all the work that's been done so far on the Wimbledon Masterplan, but just to make a couple of comments in that I know Paul was saying he was confused about a lot of the responses he got, but in terms of calling it a Wimbledon Masterplan, I think it was very misleading to all the residents. Actually, it seems to be a planning amendment, but not a Wimbledon Masterplan, which is why everybody was obsessed about traffic as well. And also, in terms of how the results have been presented back, I think some of it isn't as equitable and fair as you might expect on it. If you turn to page 23 about mid-rise architecture, there are 2 quotes. One says, I think the precedent of around 8 stories is the maximum that should be allowed. And the other quote is, I feel it's better to have a high-rise, e.g. 30 stories. If you look then at the chart underneath, 82 respondents said they preferred 8 stories, and only 1 respondent said they wanted 30 stories. And I think in terms of how it's presented, I think that could potentially bias people's take out of it. So going forward, I think we do need to make sure it's far more ethical in how it produces the results and far clearer on how the questions are asked and how the results are presented.
Okay.
And I'll stop calling it the master plan because it isn't a master plan.
Okay. So it's 1 question. Is there another question?
Yep. In the local plan, the siting of the concert hall from the entertainer shop all the way down to Black's is owned by 1 person. Are you looking to incorporate the concert hall area as the P3 as part of a full development of that whole area?
Okay. And we had a 3rd question, didn't we?
The matter was mentioned earlier about the plan going to BD.
Yeah.
Do you know when that's likely to?
Okay.
Can I add another question related to that?
I think we'll probably, why don't you regularly appear, so why don't you save it for next time?
Okay.
And we've got 10 minutes. Free shop officers are staying around to do this. Can I just briefly comment on your first question? I think I completely understand where you're coming from in particularly the concerns about mid-rise architecture. But I do just want to point out for the record that it is clearly here with the graph that you can show that there is the responses of how people, their preferences for heights and stories. I think the point that Paul made in his summing up for changing is that to change the language from stories to meters, so that people have a better idea what does this actually mean. The stories, you've got the floor.
I think it's just a clarity because also in the original proposals, the definition of mid-rise changed, and some of the legends didn't match what was said in the tables, etc. So it's really just getting some precision on what is being talked about.
I think those 3D maps would be helpful. But I think those have got 3 questions. Paul, do you want to answer those?
Yeah. Thank you for commenting also where into this plan. Yeah, I mean the graph on page 25, it isn't intended to show a preference for anything. We did get a bunch of comments around build heights, which are kind of similar, but also a lot of outliers as well. I mean, it's a consultation, the public don't all have the same view every time. So this graph really shows the extremities of what we were told, it's not showing a preference. But what is clear is between 8 and 10 seems to be the general mood. We will work on that going forward. In terms of the 3D, it's going to get horribly technical, so I apologise in advance. We originally, when we drafted this plan, we started it off in a program called SketchUp. So that's where you take Google Earth and you can draw blocks of 3D. It's horribly complex and council computers can deal with it. So we drew it up more in the kind of cartoon format images which you saw in the plan. And rightfully so, some of the feedback we got was actually the buildings wouldn't really look like that, so can you show what we really mean, Merton Council? So we will. So we need a lot more time to actually get into showing a plan that really shows what we meant and that reflects what people told us as well. The council has just signed up to, there is a 3D modelling programme called UCity. We've signed up to that. We are currently getting approvals to get that set up in Merton's IT systems. And we then will need to work on developing that 3D model. The benefit of that is, subject to all the technicalities, when developers apply to Merton for planning permission, at the pre-app stage we can ask the developer for their model and put it into ours and begin to see what the proposals look like in a Wimbledon model. So technically that is feasible. We are just going through the process of getting it approved with IT, we need trained up on it, and we might have to commission some extra architectural work on the next version of this plan anyway. So there'll be a lot more design process to go, but that model there is beginning to be used by other boroughs. And I think when you're dealing with built-up town centres, it's not just about looking at a plan, you really need to see the streets and buildings in 3D. The lesson that I learned in this, certainly looking at the model that I've got already, it's actually not about building height, it's building shape and form and mass. Height alone is not a determinant of quality, but looking at the roofscape, the angles, everything with it. And to some extent, us as a planning authority, we wouldn't normally go to that level of architecture, but in a plan that's meant to be giving guidance, we probably have to go a bit that way. So we've got a lot of work to go on the design of that. As to whether it's a master plan, I'd be interested to know what else would, back to the public, what would you call it, or what
Just an
would you like to
SPD.
pitch it as?
Yeah, just
SPD?
yeah.
Which is where it is.
I think everybody expected much more from it because
As
it's
a
called a
master
master
plan.
plan.
I think also you can come back on that. You need to take it in appreciation that it's the Merton master plan in the sense of the local plan dealing with transport and all the integrated bits, and you wouldn't be able to deal with it in isolation.
Yes,
you can't deal with Wimbledon in isolation with things like that, especially with
No,
millions of
but
people.
if you're putting something forward as a master plan, you expect it to have things like transport, environment, and everything else in it, which it didn't really.
Right, and I
Apart from the fact you couldn't really do much with the transport.
think there was a final question on the land adjacent to the council.
Yeah. So those who don't know, the current car park next to Morrison's is owned by Merton Council. It's been a development proposal site in many previous versions of the local plan. The concert hall, I think I put in the public domain that's where they fancy putting the front gate building. So naturally that's why the concert hall are engaging with the council as a landowner as well as planning authority. The building next door is Tara, correct me, is that a proposal site in the new local plan?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
So Bank of Montreal are the pension fund that own that. Many of you know Wimbledon, that was built early 2000s, maybe late 90s. So most commercial leases tend to be 25-30 years. So even without any planning activity in Merton, Morrison's, Odeon and everything else in that building, the leases will run out at a point in time during this plan. And any pension fund investor or occupier of that building have choices. They either renovate and stay, it gets redeveloped, or whatever else. So through the master plan engagement, we could work with Bank of Montreal to see actually what is the investment timeline for this building, what is its future, what's their ambition, how does that site actually meet Merton and the borough's residents' ambitions for Wimbledon. So all that is in train. We haven't looked at whether it's one all-encompassing concert hall mixed-use development. It could be, it could not be. I mean, it's down to land ownership, it's down to funding. I would say with the concert hall and the car park, it would be literally sitting behind Morrison's. It's not a complete attractor to the town centre. It would make sense to develop the sites together. It doesn't mean they need to be developed by the same developer. And again, this is the beauty of the master plan. This is about coordination, not massively how things look, but how the plan is coordinated. So in response to your question, it could be either or. There's no project is other than that.
Okay. So the reason I'm also asking is because that's the main piazza of Wimbledon. So if you are thinking of developing, obviously that is the main part of the town, the main town centre. What's it going to look like, and what have you got planned? Because if we're going to take the hotel at the back on Hartfield Road as a a model of what's going to come next, we're in trouble in terms of design, in terms of mass, in terms of style, and it is not a good look for the town, given the 2040 Wimbledon Society Plan and what you're saying, which is heartening right now.
To be continued, and we'll no doubt see in the 3D plans as well some interesting opportunities there.
It won't be in the 3D plan.
Cool. Thank you very much.